Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Brooks, the very first one. I hope that this finds you safe from fires, safe from hurricanes, safe from COVID. It has been a heck of a 7 months, but we're going to take you on a journey today and get you outside of all of that and take you deep into the Willamette Valley. You know, we came up with the Beyond Brooks idea pretty much right after COVID started. And as I typically do, I love to watch and see what other people are doing before I take any action. And I watched so many wineries and so many people in the wine industry doing different virtual events, but they were all about wine. And so I thought, you know what, we need to get outside of wine. And we need to go seek out our partners in different industries that carry the same values and standards that we do in terms of quality, and people that we want to help cross-promote, and people that we want to share our customers with, that we trust these people enough that we want to introduce you to them. So I'm super excited to start today with Beyond Brooks, partnering with Durant Farms and my dear friend Paul Durant, and talking about his olive oils. As you all know at Brooks, every time you spend money with us, we are giving to somebody. All the dollars that you spend at Brooks, 1% of those go to 1% for the planet. That company is a nonprofit that directs money towards other environmental nonprofits that we really get to have say over. So we've been working for the last 1.5 years with a company called Kiss the Ground that has been the recipient of our 1% donation, and they've been fabulous. We also, for this program specifically, picked a partner called Wine Unify, and Wine Unify is a new company that started throughout the pandemic, really related to a lot of the social injustice issues about trying to provide more opportunity to minorities to get into the world of wine. They've found that the obstacles of getting into the wine industry include funding, it includes mentorship, and it includes feeling excluded. So their dollars and their entity are really working on welcoming people from minorities and other underrepresented groups, elevate them amongst the wine industry, and then amplify their knowledge and who they are within the industry. So $5 from every package sold for Beyond Brooks for this particular segment is going to Wine Unify, and we're proud to say that they're getting over $650 just from this first segment alone. So super proud of that, and you should be too. So thank you. Thank you for your support, not only of Beyond Brooks, but the entities that we're also giving to. And with that, I want to welcome our moderator for this session. So Bree Stock is a good friend of mine. She's a master of wine, which there's very few of in the world. She is native to Australia, but has been in Oregon for a number of years, and is probably one of the most important educational figures, not only in the Oregon wine industry, but in the industry abroad. She's been working with the Oregon Wine Board for years. She puts together our Oregon Wine Symposium. Her knowledge is deep. And so when I had this idea to do Beyond Brooks, I thought, who can I bring on board that's way smarter than I am, and that could help me really moderate and just make these really interesting connections and discussions. So with that, I would love to introduce you, Bree.
Thank you, Janie, for that incredibly generous introduction. I don't know about way smarter than you. I'm definitely a cork dork, and so very much into wine, but I know you are also. But I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to see this program actually come to fruition. I remember very early on in the shutdown with COVID, when you and I started discussing how do we stay connected, and who all the good people that are doing great things out there, and how do we have some really interesting conversations and take our Willamette Valley to the rest of the world still, because we know we have so many wine tourists who come here who aren't able to do that at the moment. And when they're here, they discover that the Willamette Valley is so much more than just a wine touring region. It's completely unique, and that's really what I fell in love with the Willamette Valley in 2014 when I first met you. Was that I came here expecting a Burgundian atmosphere of vineyard side by side. And there's definitely that, but there are so many other interesting farming operations happening side by side. And it really just felt like a very cohesive and close-knit farming valley. When you drive up to Brooks, it's driving past hazelnut orchards and apple orchards and old vines as well, and then forests of Doug firs all around. Knowing that we go hunting for chanterelles and things like that in those forests as well. And somehow all of these products end up on our plates often. And I think that that's what a lot of people discover when they come to the Willamette Valley for the first time. So I was really happy that we could come up with these ideas, and I'm excited to be here talking about these beautiful products, our beautiful valley, and the beautiful wines with you. Just a couple of housekeeping things first. So if you are having any technical issues, just jump over into the chat and there will be a link to some troubleshooting. But what we've found is that the best way to troubleshoot your way out of any technical issues outside of poor Wi-Fi or internet is to just hit the refresh on your browser, and that usually does the trick for you. So hit the refresh if you're having any issues. Otherwise, jump into the chat and our IT guys will help you out in there as well. Also talking about the chat is to be used between all of you sitting there listening to us talk. Please chat amongst yourselves. And if you see anyone from Brooks on there that like Heather or Stephen or anyone, just jump in and say hi to them. This is, supposed to be friendly and social. It's not a serious seminar. We're getting together and doing things that we love, even though we can't be physically together at the moment. So reach out and be connected to everyone. Say hi. And then finally, if you have a Q&A, the Q&A profile in the middle there, if you have questions for Janie or for Paul or for myself, shoot them into that Q&A column. And there's kind of a fun little democratic process that can happen in there as well, which is you can vote for which questions should be asked first and who gets to answer them. So please jump in there and have some fun with it as well, and keep us all on our toes with questions. And then finally, just wanted to remind everyone that you should have some glassware in front of you, and of course the wines. So I have both of the wines open and ready to go. The Old Vine Pommard, whoops, trying to get in front of my camera, and the Highland Riesling. I have a glass each for those. I've already started on my Riesling. I'm sorry, I just can't help it. It's, it's Riesling. It's perfect for any occasion. So Riesling in the glasses, and then have 3 other glasses ready to go as well. You just need regular little, I've got the Govino glasses because I'm uber clumsy and shatter things everywhere. So these plastic little glasses are fantastic for me. But we will pour we'll pour the olive oils into those glasses as well. There we go. And that's how we'll taste the olive oils as well. We will be tasting the wines first, and then followed by the olive oils, so that we can, not disturb our palate too much with some of the bitter flavors and textures that we find in the olive oil. So finally, one other new feature which I love about this great platform is at the end of the seminar, if you're all feeling social and want to hang around for a bit, we've set up some lounges. So jump into the lounges. They hold around 12 people, and you can continue any conversations with some friends that you've met online on this seminar in those lounges. There's also some fun photo booths in those lounges as well. So you can get on there and take some pictures of yourself in the photo booth and have lots of fun with us as well. So please jump into the lounges at the end of this session and continue having a couple of glasses of wine. Okay. we have a lovely image of the North Willamette Valley on the map here. As you can see, Oregon is really, our Willamette Valley runs right up to the Washington border, and the Willamette Valley American viticultural area is quite a large viticultural area. It covers 3.5 million acres. Not all of that is suitable for vineyards plantings. A lot of it is mountainous, covered in Doug firs. There's a lot of rivers and creeks and channeled valleys, but the majority of the founding vineyards are found in the northern Willamette Valley. And that's what you can see on these AVAs here, and where Durant is located, where Brooks is located, and our Highland Vineyard, where we source Riesling from, is located. When we started talking about what we wanted to chat about in relation to the olive oil, was we really wanted to talk about how important the founders are in this valley and some of the old vines. And the Durant family was really one of the pioneering families who planted vines 47 years ago in this valley. And they were one of the founding families of the Dundee Hills AVA. So we're super excited to have the second generation owner, Paul Durant, here with us today to talk about his beautiful olive groves, and maybe he'll touch on some of these vineyards as well. And then obviously Brooks, they're not quite as established or old as Durant, but they certainly are in the Eola Amity Hills AVA, and they are committed to really working with some of the oldest vines in our region. So the Highland Riesling, for example, has been planted in the Willamette. Riesling has been planted in the Willamette Valley for as long as, actually, before Prohibition, and was one of the first varieties that was replanted after Prohibition. So Highland Vineyard is very old as well. And what I love about Brooks and their commitment to Riesling is that they have over 24 different Rieslings, often designated by a state, and they're really championing and trying to protect these old vines, and that's super important to our valley. We're super lucky to be able to have access to all of these founders, and most of this is within just a 30-minute drive of each other. I live in McMinnville. In 20 minutes, I can be at Durant. In 20 minutes, I can be at Brooks. And really, that's what we're coming together to discuss here, is that I don't get to see these guys anymore. So now I'm reaching out virtually and tasting and chatting about their wines and their oils virtually, and looping you all in with this. So that's how we got started with this. And now I'm going to bring Paul Durant, owner of Durant Olive Mill and Durant Wines, onto the stage. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. I think this is obviously kind of a new frontier for us all, and it's neat to see kind of the arc of time go back with Janie. I went to high school with Janie and her brother, so it's super special to be able to kind of reconnect with her in this new era that we find ourselves in. And also it gives us a really great chance to kind of talk about what we're doing here. And I know I saw some familiar names on the chat, which was really awesome to see. A lot of common customers there. But just a little bit about the property here. My family, my parents came up here. My mom grew up on a big cattle ranch in Northern California, and really wanted my sister and I to experience agriculture. It was kind of in her DNA, so to speak. And so we started the vineyards in the early 70s, and it's grown over time. And now, I'm second generation. You can see my folks there, and those are my two girls. And we all live here on the farm. I literally live within less than a mile of my parents. And it's just been a great experience for me to grow up here and, mark almost 40 some years. We're still in the business, and we've branched out, and that's kind of what we bring to the table today is our olive oil. We started with the olive oils back in around 2005. I really kind of describe my parents as these agricultural entrepreneurs, and just kind of how they innovated in the wine industry. They started innovating around kind of specialty plants. It was really a passion of my mom's, and one of those specialty plants was olives. And So I really give them a ton of credit for kind of leading the charge for me. I'm really the beneficiary of a lot of their really great hard work. So today we have about 13 acres of olive trees. We've been iterating around it for many, many years around kind of what's the right agronomy, how do we grow them here. We're clearly one of the furthest northern latitudes in the world to be growing these types of trees. So it's pretty crazy. And we've made a ton of strides in the last few years. And so that's what makes me really excited to be able to share with you oil that's actually off the estate. You know, we do source some olives out of Northern California, but this oil that you're going to taste is 100% Oregon grown, Oregon milled. It's really special, and it is truly a unique oil. One of the things you'll notice if you see on your bottle there or the box that it came in, you know, this is the first Oregon award-winning oil in the New York International Olive Oil Show that happens every year, olive oil competition. And so it was kind of a big honor for us to see it recognized last spring. And so you also see in some pictures of the property here. This is really kind of the slide previous to that was the gift shop, where it's really kind of my mom's pride and joy. And then also we're obviously in the wine business too, as I mentioned, kind of grew up in the vineyards. And this is our tasting room that you're seeing here in this photo. And really, I think a lot of what we share similar value with Brooks, which is about connecting with customers. You know, I take a lot of pride in being able to hand sell these bottles. You know, it's really kind of the essence of the business, so to speak, is to really reach out and interact with people. And obviously, kind of the new technology with what we're doing here today allows us to do that. And it's just a real pleasure to be here. I've monologued plenty here, Bree. So what else do I need to talk about?
I'm still caught on the fact that you guys grow grapes, grow olives, you then make the wine as well, and then right after harvest, because you're not exhausted enough already, you go into the olive harvest and then into the milling. So I mean, kudos to you and the family. It's
pretty crazy. And it's we finished grape harvest yesterday. We've got about 10 days or so, and then olives will show up. And, really for me, in a lot of respects, I enjoy the wine. There's no question about it. I love growing the grapes, but I really, really love to run that mill. It's all mechanical moving parts. We'll talk a little bit about the essence of extra virgin olive oil. It's so different than making wine. There isn't. It's just the whole process is just. I find it fascinating. And at times very, very, very frustrating as well. But,
just like wine, yeah. Well, I'm excited to chat all about the milling process and the growing process and the varieties and the flavors, and understanding extra virgin olive oil a little better in just a little while. I love this shot as well, this beautiful sunrise shot that just, captures the hearts of so many in this valley. You see a similar shot from the Brooks tasting room as well, and Brooks Winery, where you're both situated on the east facing ridge, looking towards the Cascade mountain ranges and the beautiful volcanoes that are in there. And the way the fog and mist settles in our valley floors, it's just so picturesque, and you can never take enough shots of these beautiful hillsides, and what a spectacular place to grow up. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and your philosophy, and I can't wait to taste the olive oils again. I'm going to bring up Janie, which is the view that you're looking at now is from the Brooks tasting room. And I'm actually sitting here looking out the window of the farmhouse to the left of me. And I'm waving at you, Paul, because I can see the Dundee Hills from here. So we're almost high-fiving. Yeah. Welcome, Janie. And I know so many on here probably already know the Brooks story, but I can never hear it too many times. It's just so special, and what part of this valley is about. And I love knowing that you and Paul and Jimmy all went to school together, and it makes it, it just reinforces how special this place is again for me. Can you tell us a little bit about the Brooks philosophies and where you're headed and where you've come from?
Sure. So first off, location-wise, so we're a little bit further south of Paul. This picture of the sunrise is in the Eola Amity Hills, and we're about 750 feet in elevation. So I think a little bit higher up possibly than where Paul is. But yeah, this is a typical sunrise photo over our vineyard in the morning. And I'm not sure, Katie, if the photo can come up. We're not seeing the slides. Anyway, I'll keep going and she can catch up with us. There we go.
There we go.
So this is a picture of our winery that we built in 2014. And, I think, as Paul was saying too, super integral to what I care about personally, having a winery, besides producing a really great quality product, is for the experience for people. And so we're big believers in community building. Very, very fortunate that our tasting room has really become a community center for the Eola Amity Hills. We really believe in diversity. We have so many different wines, wanting to make sure everybody has something. Our tasting room has food. We have beer on tap. We have cider on tap. We don't really care what you drink. We just want you to all come congregate and be with us. I mentioned quality already, and really purity. At the end of the day, we really, really want to bring forth in our wines what we actually find in the vineyards. And that can be somewhat of a cliche, but there's also so many different growing decisions that you make in the winery that allow that true expression of fruit. And we're so lucky that our estate vineyard was put.
Did we lose Janie for a second there?
And
oh, there she is. Yeah, you're back now.
Oh. Anyway, I was saying that we're lucky that we have some of the oldest vines in the Willamette Valley planted back in 1974. So we can go to the next slide.
Next slide. There we go.
So real quickly on the story, many of you who have followed Brooks do know it. My brother, Jimmy Brooks, was the founder of Brooks and came into the industry in the late 90s. And relative to this conversation, one of the missions that he had was to restore the reputation of Riesling in the Willamette Valley. And so he went on a hunt back in the late 90s to find any Riesling that hadn't already been ripped out and planted as Pinot Noir or a different varietal. So we're super fortunate that most of the vineyards that we work with, including the Highland that you'll taste today, are some of the oldest vines in the Willamette Valley. So we have access to some of the oldest Riesling, which is fabulous. My brother left us unexpectedly at the age of 38. This picture is with his son just a couple months before he passed away. He had an aortic dissection. And I was taken basically by the community in the Willamette Valley and told that they really thought that the brand should continue, that what he was doing with Riesling and some of these older vines was really important, as well as his farming, and offered to make the wine that first year for free if I would help on the business side. So here I am, 16 years later, still a volunteer, loving what I do, but really carrying on his legacy. And as you'll see in the next picture, his son is now 24, Pascal. This day, these two were actually being extremely sassy. They went during the photo shoot from man buns to this look. But Pascal, Jimmy's son, is in the plaid shirt, and he is the outright owner of our winery. And the gentleman in the red shirt is our winemaker, Chris Williams. And Chris was Jimmy's assistant winemaker and has been our winemaker ever since. So Pascal, Chris, and I are super fortunate that we kind of inherited Jimmy's mission in terms of finding some of these older sites and really being committed to Riesling. And we're very honored that we get to carry that forward.
Yeah, and such a beautiful story. And I love hearing about and discovering another Riesling vineyard that you guys have discovered, because when I think that I kind of know where they all are and where all the old vines are, you guys will pop up with another single estate vineyard of this amazing old vine Riesling. So I always love following along with your discoveries as well, and where Chris and Claire and Pascal lead the Brooks wines into. It's always a really lovely discovery as well. So now we're going to jump into the tasting of the wines as well. Do I still have Janie there? Paul, do you see Janie at all? You do not. Okay, well, maybe it's just me doing the tasting then. Paul, you're welcome to come back on stage and help taste with me as well. Excellent. So I think what we're going to do is actually start out tasting the old vine Pommard. So we're going to begin with Pinot Noir, which there's a question in the chat about which grape is the most well-known in the North Willamette Valley. And I would say hands down, it's Pinot Noir. Well, I think even actually the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, I think their brand motto or title is "We are Pinot Noir." So Andrew, that answers your question right there. And this old vine Pinot Noir is actually from the Brooks estate, which you were looking at earlier. And so there's some beautiful old vines on this property, and Pommard was one of the very first clones of Pinot Noir that were planted in this valley. And it was Pommard and Wadensville were the two clones that David Lett and Charles Curry brought to the Willamette Valley in 1965 and planted those. And what I love about this clone, and actually both Wadensville and Pommard, is that it's so unique to the Willamette Valley. You go to Burgundy, and obviously there's Pommard there, but it's a different clone. So this has come through the University of California, Davis, and both Charles Curry and David Lett were at UC Davis and brought this clone up to the Willamette Valley with them in 1965. Let's pour some so we can get tasting. I love how ethereal and pale these Pinot Noirs are. It, for me, is just why the variety is so transparent and really so elegant. So Pommard, let me get back to the Pommard story and then I'll finish that. Pommard is basically what we now call an heirloom selection of the Willamette Valley, and it's having a real resurgence here as well. Vineyards now in today, new vineyards today's day and age are still planting this variety, and I'm really happy to hear that, because for me and Pommard, Paul, I don't know about for you, but Pommard is so distinctive and so distinctive part of the wines in the Willamette Valley. For me, it always has this really lovely foresty, earthy sort of flavor profile and structure to it as well. How do you compare Pommard to say Wadensville or some of the others? Do you have a lot of Pommard planted in your own vines?
I think my father absolutely loves Pommard, and so the first planting that we put in 1973 was actually from some cuttings from David Lett. That went in, and still some of those vines are still producing today. It's off one of our favorite vineyard blocks called Bishop. And as a consequence, my father's deep love of Pommard, we have a lot of it planted here at Durant. But it is exactly how you describe it. It's kind of pale in color, but it's certainly this very ethereal, lush, very complex. And I think Pommard for me is so, even more so, it really reflects the terroir and the microclimate in which it's grown, more so than other states, some of the more robust clones of Pinot Noir that are out there. So it is truly delicious, especially I think with Pommard, maybe because it is an older clone in the valley, but it does tend to, as an old vine wine, I think it really shows a profound sense of elegance and ageability too. So.
Yeah, I think so as well. And for me, it really holds that really bright acidity that you find in general in Oregon wines anyway. We always have this really lovely bright fruit and bright acidity. But for me, the Pommard brings that brightness of fruit and brightness of acidity and elegance, along with this earthy, almost forest floor character as well, that's sort of wrapped around a cherry as well. And I really just, I agree with you completely that, yeah, for being old vines and for being well-aged wines, I will always go towards Pommard and the Pommard Wädenswil blends that historically were made here.
Yeah.
So let's take a couple of swirls, get some air into this wine. It's still a pretty young wine at 2017 vintage, and the 2007 vintage was a bit of a late bloomer as well. Katie, if we can go back, I think one slide to the old vine. Yes, so this is the beautiful, that's it. The beautiful old vine Pommard that's at Brooks. And you can see the volcanic soils here as well. So these are Nakayer and Jory volcanic soils. They're the same volcanic soils that Durant is grown on in the Dundee Hills. But there's a little bit more Nakayer and thinner topsoil of volcanics here in the Eola Amity as compared to the Dundee Hills. And so you find that tension on the palate, I think, in these wines as well, of those vines entering the sort of kohler flavors coming from the volcanic soils, but then also going into the bedrock beneath that, because they don't have quite as much moisture in the soils because of the shallow volcanic topsoil. So they're a little more structured, they take maybe a little longer to open up, whereas Dundee Hills for me is opulent and forward and just singing almost as soon as you open a bottle, no matter what age. So this wine, let's have a taste. Traditionally, you would, taste and spit out the Pinot Noir. It's Saturday and it's lunchtime, so I cheers, Paul. Yeah, Paul, exactly like you mentioned, the depth on that palate as well, that acid, the bright acid profile, that sort of savory hint of forest floor, almost, that Doug fir kind of character in there. There's a wildness that almost makes me feel like I am foraging for chanterelles right now. There's just that hint of mushroom, a hint of fresh leaf flavor as well. Really transparent and elegant wines, and I love Pommard for that, and I love the volcanic soils for that. I think that it is so unique for Willamette Valley to have these volcanic soils and these unique clones that really make beautiful long-lived wines.
And I think it's really I find it fascinating too with the Pommard. Say that 2017 Pommard from the Dundee Hills, which tends to be a little bit of a warmer AVA, versus Brooks, which is a little bit closer to that Van Duzer effect and a little bit closer to the Coast Range. And so you end up with these, these high-minded, a little bit more acidic, high-stepping Pinot Noirs versus maybe the ones in our AVA that are a little bit more, lush, so to speak. But those are lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you both, face east, so you both get that nice warming morning sun that sort of dries off the dew off the vines in the morning as well. But you're right, the Eola Amity Hills and Brooks, you get that sort of cooling influence in the afternoon that comes over the backside of the winery and down into this vineyard. And you really, from about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're starting to look for your sweater, even in summer. And the Dundee Hills just tend to be a little more protected from that wind of the Van Duzer corridor, and so have that, sort of like you say, that plushness and that opulence in their wines as well. And we have Janie back now.
Hi.
So hi. we're enjoying the Pommard. So cheers. Yeah. I hope you are as well. Janie, is there something that you wanted to tell us about the Brooks Estate Vineyard and these vines? I know that we can see here that there's a lot of cover crop in the rows here, and you know, there's no irrigation clearly. Does the cover crop that you're keeping there with these more shallow volcanic soils, how does that help the vines? Does that try to trap in some more moisture for the vines?
You know, we use it often for competition. So when we tend to have sections that have a lot of vigor, we'll put in a more vigorous cover crop so that the vines slow down a little bit and have a little bit more competition for nutrients and for water. So it varies. Like, we change it every year. We change what we're using every year. We do different soil tests. So if we need certain nutrients in the soil, we'll use different cover crops for that. So it really varies from year to year.
And this vintage, the 2017, it was quite a late flowering and bud burst this year, to my memory. Was this a year where you found that because of that shorter growing season, you were maybe trying to moderate some of the farming practices that way? And also, when was the harvest date for this wine?
It was the last week of September. We did get a lot of heat, even though we were later overall in the season. We had a much warmer summer than normal. So things actually caught up to a little bit more typical for us. Our vineyard, our estate is always the last thing we pick, typically for Pinot and for Riesling.
And is that because of the vine age? You tend to find that those vines are a little bit more balanced and can sort of push to the end of the season for you?
Yeah, it's, you know, because we do have some younger vines on the property as well, younger being the late 90s. But yeah, the Pomar definitely is later. It's later ripening, and from those Van Duzer winds, you know, we'll change. You just mentioned the diurnal shift. We'll change 15 degrees, you know, in a hot August afternoon, and so it really slows things down for us for sure. And also being up at 750 feet in elevation, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is obvious when you're here in the valley for harvest that you're generally, you know, not picking fruit in the Eola Amity Hills until closer to, you know, late September. Whereas I find that, you know, the northerly AVAs like Chehalem and Dundee will often be starting to pick or thinking about picking even towards the end of August, and generally by the first or second week of September they're starting to pick. Is that pretty true for you as well, Paul?
Yeah, I would say so, for sure. You
Yeah.
know, and it's certainly over the years, especially in 2017, you know, obviously a very warm vintage, big crop, but still fruit got ripe, and you know, that was something that, but we're typically on the earlier side, just in general, for sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's move into now the Riesling tasting. Since we've been talking about Riesling for so long, I'm going to have to top up my glass because I was sipping this in the pre-show because it's Riesling. So the Highland Estate Riesling, you know, Janie, one thing I love about your Riesling wines, because Riesling can be, you know, a little intimidating for a lot of people because you don't know what you're getting in Riesling often, you know. Is it going to be dry? Is it going to be sweet? You know, I love that Oregon generally has this sort of balance of drier styles with just a hint more extract in their Rieslings as well, and it feels like you mentioned earlier, very pure to me, very pure of the grape variety. But I did want to point out to everyone, I love this on the back label, the International Riesling Federation's Riesling scale. So you know exactly what you're getting when you purchase a bottle of Brooks Riesling. So I am right here, medium sweet. I know what the elevation of the site is. I know the vines are planted in 1974. For a cork dork like myself, I love having this much detail on the back, so thank you.
Yeah, that was not my brainchild, but I had a couple of people on our team, and Claire, who's our assistant winemaker, they spent a whole day in retail stores in Portland turning bottles around. to see what information people put on there, and then they kind of crafted what they thought was the most important. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, Claire's a very big thinker, so she's I love that about her, and yeah, there's often not a lot of information on the back of wines, and so this for me just has so much detail. I love it.
Yeah.
Janie, can you tell us a little bit about the Highland Riesling, how you make it? And I love this site in McMinnville AVA. It's kind of a bridging point almost, the McMinnville AVA. You don't tend to see many wines specifically designated with that AVA, but it does have some really fantastic old vine vineyards in there, and I think Highland is one of those that really best represents this AVA, which has, again, primarily volcanic soil, but really thin, shallow volcanic soil, so the vines tend to struggle a bit. They do still get a hit from the Van Duzer corridor winds, but they don't get nearly as much impact as the Eola Amity Hills or the Van Duzer corridor AVA itself. And then this Highland Vineyard is such an old vineyard as well, 1974 plantings. This Riesling clone was actually taken from the original Riesling plantings out now David Hill, but Charles Curry's original site. And I know that Highland have a lot of those Curry clones that were planted out there, and I think it's a really unique Riesling and a really unique site, and I love the tension of this wine on the palate. Can you tell me a little bit more about what Claire and Chris and the team found so compelling about this site?
Yeah, well, Jimmy actually found this site. So this was a site that we inherited when he passed away, and it went back to, who had Riesling back in the late 90s. And Jack had planted it there at Highland, which was amazing. So it's a super special site to us. From a winemaking standpoint, obviously for us, all of our whites are pressed off immediately, and we ferment everything in stainless steel. We do everything in small lots. So even though we have maybe one block from Highland, we split that into smaller tanks so that we can create different blending components. And Highland's actually been the site since 16 for our sparkling Riesling. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That tells you how cool it is, and how it retains its acidity there quite well also. And just as you mentioned, Jimmy finding this site, was Jimmy the first to begin biodynamic farming in the McMinnville AVA as well?
Well, he was partnering with Mo Momtazi. So he had been consulting with Mo when he bought his vineyard back in the mid-90s to farm it biodynamically. And then he moved over there in 2001 to be their founding winemaker. So he was definitely a leader in the movement. He started farming our estate in 2002 biodynamically.
Wow. And so obviously really knows that McMinnville AVA quite well also, and so has nabbed some of the best plantings and grapes coming out of there as well.
He was right down the street.
Perfect. Well, I love how much there's this perfect balance of racy acidity, which is really mouth-watering and cleansing for me on the palate. But what I really like is that there's a richness to the texture and the extract in Brooks Riesling as well. And I feel like that's when you meet Chris, you kind of know that all time goes out the window, and you just kind of fall in line with what his schedule is and the vines and the wines. And I kind of get this feeling from this Riesling is that it's been pressed in accordance to like what Chris believes in that, and probably what he learned with Jimmy from traveling, in France and around as well. But this sort of longer press cycle, a little bit longer skin contact really brings in the true purity of the fruit in this wine for me. And I love how much orchard fruit there is, and citrus notes, and almost this lavender and lemongrass type character as well. There's some really beautiful herbal touches there as well. It's quite complex. and obviously going to age a long time with that Riesling in check as well, with that Riesling acidity. Yeah.
It is something we are guilty of, is releasing things too soon, but
it's delicious right now as well. So, so that is our wine tasting portion. I think now we should head back over to Paul and start tasting a little bit around the olive oils. I know we're coming up to the 2:00 hour, and I know we got started a little bit late, but trying to keep everyone tasting along with us here. So after tasting the Riesling, you notice how refreshed your mouth is, and really ready for some food. So if you have some bread or some crackers, feel free to, have some with this olive oil. But Paul, I would love you to walk us through the process a little bit of just how this beautiful product comes into being, and with the mill as well.
So I think I mentioned on the property, we have about 13 acres of olives currently planted, and a real variety of different types, because obviously it's a journey of exploration for us in terms of what grows. Things that we thought would be ideal here turned out to not be. We're always looking for new trees. There are just such a multitude of olive trees out there that we're always kind of on the hunt for new ones, and then also really working on kind of the agronomy of how to grow them. OSU, Oregon State University Extension Service, has started a research grant to look at maybe as how to really make these things thrive in the Willamette Valley. And so, as I mentioned, this bottle is 100% estate. And if you look at that, you can see the color, it's just a deep emerald green. Typically, if you get more of an olive oil from your grocery store, those sorts of things, it won't have this emerald green, or the emerald green is there initially, but then fades. But you can see this is a 2019 oil, so it is almost a year old, but still retains a lot of that vibrancy that just adds some complexity to it. And people talk about what makes it, is there such a thing as terroir with Oregon? And I would say, yes, there is when it comes to olive oil, just as much as there is with wine. So a little bit about just the process of making olive oil. Basically, when I'm milling, I'm looking for three things, and we'll taste this here in a minute. I want fruitiness, I want bitterness, and I want pungency. And those are all influenced by time and temperature during the milling process. So I can bring fruitiness forward by a little less time, a little less heat. I can bring bitterness in by adding more heat to the process. And then pungency is simply an extraction. How much can I extract to get the pungency? And so the fruitiness, you'll get that initially across the tip of your tongue. You'll get some astringency, the bitterness, which is really tannin, skin tannins. You'll taste that bitterness, and then the pungency is the burn at the back of the throat. And ideally, in a good olive oil, all three of those will be in balance. And that's, sometimes you miss it, sometimes you get it right. It's never exactly the same process each time.
I love that. That's fascinating, and different textures and flavors that we normally wouldn't be looking for in wine, but I think are probably really important to the palate structure as well. Some of that bitterness that you mentioned, and I think maybe we look at as tartness or sourness or something in wine, but maybe I'm talking about the extract in the Riesling as being a little bit of that sort of bitterness similarities in the olive oil as well. And we just had a question come through about, does olive oil have vintages like wine does? And I think you mentioned that this was a 2019 vintage.
It is a 2019. Olive oil is interesting, though, in that it's at its peak freshness the day it's milled. And then, as I took classes around milling at UC Davis, the processing of olive oil never ends. Because it's really all about how do you store that oil, how does it get bottled? Because people liken it to fresh squeezed orange juice, and you just want to just kind of really preserve that as long as you can, because olive oils just don't age. They're not going to go through those ebbs and flows of like what a wine does. And so it's really meant to be treated with great care, but then also be consumed in great haste. Is kind of how I kind of describe it.
And so is there a hint for understanding when we're getting the freshest olive oil possible? At a supermarket or something, is there a harvest date or a milling date that we see?
So ideally, what you'll see at a grocery store is you want to look at the milling date and the bottling date. And that would be, because that really is how long has that oil been in a bottle? What a best by date, which you'll often see, really means nothing. It doesn't tell you anything about, when was the oil made, and most importantly too, when was the oil bottled. And so best by dates are just misleading at best. Right.
And so there's really not a good idea to try to age olive oil because you're trying to capture that freshness and the brightness that's there.
Yeah, and generally what I tell people based on, look at our bottle and you'll be able to get a sense of when we made it. And then in general, we bottle most of the oils that we sell here off the farm or some local distribution. They've probably been in the bottle for maybe 2 to 3 months tops. And so from that time, depending on how you store it, you probably have about a year of good shelf life.
Great. I love how green it is, and I love that it almost has that unfiltered look to it as well. Like you see in wine often, that little bit of haze in the glass and in the bottle that makes you feel like, I don't know, like it's a whole fruit smoothie or something, like that it's actual, there's nutritional goodness in there for you because of that richness and sort of unfiltered look to it. And these beautiful olives that you have on the screenshot here now, how many different varieties, or do we call them clones, or are they varieties?
Well, they're really primarily they're varieties. There's a few clones out there, but kind of clonal maintenance is it's the Wild West when it comes to olives. It's basically the varietal selection is as close as you can get. And so we're probably growing about 15 different varieties here.
Wow.
Some of them, and the olives you're seeing there are Arbequina, which are very small, but they produce a great amount of oil. So they're really an olive that is meant for oil production. The primary olive that went into this bottle does have some Arbequina, but it's primarily Italian varietals that went into this. So those are Lecinos, Frentoios, Pentolinos, Moriolo, and those tend to be big. They're a big meaty olive, and they definitely, the Arbequina tends to be a little bit more lighter bodied, whereas these Italian varietals tend to be much more robust and a little bit more hardy.
So you're picking those for this estate oil to give that richness and flavor and to give the strongest essence of the estate in there.
That's correct. Yep.
And what are you looking for when you're harvesting the olives? I mean, I know with grapes, when we're harvesting grapes, we're looking for that balance between the sugar being high and up and then the acidity still being present as well and not dropping too much. So what kind of flavors are you looking for? I know in Riesling that I'm looking for some of those citrus and orchard flavors and just that real balance between the sugar and acid, making sure there's still acid, but making sure I'm getting some flavor from the grapes themselves, not just grapey flavor. What is it like when you're looking for a ripe olive?
Well, it's really, obviously a ripe olive versus an unripe olive, they all taste terrible. So you can't get any sense of what it's going to taste in terms of the bottle. So when we look at, like you can see here, we look at color. So obviously the darker the fruit, the more the riper it is and the higher the oil content. The greener the fruit, less oil, but more of the polyphenols and kind of phenols that really add some flavor to the oil. So we're kind of looking at color. You will cut open the olive and we'll look how deep does the color penetrate towards the pit. Those are some things. And then also there's obviously analytical testing. where we can look at oil content, because you don't want high oil content, because then you're sacrificing flavor.
Right.
So it's kind of looking for a little bit of a sweet spot, but it's really more of a quantitative study than it is a qualitative one. And then the other reality too is if the weather is going bad, we're going to pick. So, last year we had a freeze on Halloween. So we were out there hustling to get fruit picked. It wasn't ripe. But, it ended up here.
Wow.
So it's not all bad.
Wow. Yeah. Walk us through perfect timing. Can we walk us through the extraction and milling process as well? I mean, this kind of looks a little bit like a winery to me. But...
A little bit. So basically the process here is what you're seeing here in this picture. This is actually the smallest commercial mill you can buy. And if you were to go to a big mill in California or in Europe or any of those locations, the components are exactly the same. And they just get scaled up. So the machine to the right is the washer, and then really the heart of the mill, and you can see the gentleman lifting the lid. That's called a malaxation tank, and that's where all the magic happens. So basically, we grind the olive up into a paste, we load it into that tank, and then slowly we turn it. And this is where we can play with two variables. We can play with time, and we can play with heat, and that's all you got. And so basically we kind of look at that intersection of time and temperature to try and ascertain like when the oil is ready to be extracted from the paste. And then you basically go through a series of steps where you're removing the solids and getting an oil water mixture. And then after that, you can get you remove the water from the oil. So it's kind of and throughout these steps, there are certain things you can do. You can do some water adds, you can add water in, you can take water out. We can play with some speeds in terms of extraction, but the biggest variable in terms of making a high quality olive oil is just right in that tank right in front of you, where that malaxation takes place.
Wow. Katie, can you move it forward to the next slide as well? I love this shot. It is, I mean, I feel like I'm almost just looking at this bottle, what's coming straight into this bottle. Did you just literally put the bottle right under there, or is there another process that happens?
There's another process that happens. So basically, if you look you can see that oil there. It's a little bit cloudy. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of still some basically olive particulate matter in there. And this is the product that we call oleo nuovo, so new oil. And so it's kind of a precious commodity at this point, because the solid olive particulate is adding first and foremost texture, so the oil is thick, and then it's also adding a lot of intensity to it. And if the oil is left in this state, it would only be good for about 90 days.
Wow.
So basically, what we'll do, we'll let the oil settle for about 20 days, and then we'll filter it. But then we'll also, I mean, it's a product we do sell, but it's got a very limited shelf life. So you can see here from where that oil, it's got a little bit of that turbidity or cloudiness to it. We'll filter it, and you can see now as if you pour some oil in your glass, you can see it's very clear emerald color.
Yeah, it's a beautiful emerald color, but it's so rich. So if we wanted to get our hands on some of this oleo nuovo oil, we would need to be in the tasting room in maybe December, or
kind of November. We'll start milling here in a couple weeks, but we'll start bottling that oleo nuovo up in November. So kind of November and December is when it's readily available.
Great. Yeah. That sounds like so much fun. Let's definitely move into tasting this gorgeous. I've been smelling it now so much.
Yeah. So basically, the process when it comes to tasting olive oil is if you can, you kind of warm the glass a little bit, and then you basically inhale, really get a sense of the smell and kind of the aroma that's coming off the oil. It kind of almost primes your palate to taste the oil. And, and it should never taste kind of muddy or muddled, so to speak. It should have kind of a vibrancy to it. And then the oil is, the tasting of oil and the tasting of wine are very similar. So basically you take it in across the tip of your tongue, you might aspirate that a little bit, basically slurp some air through it, because that kind of releases more of the compounds, more of those phenols that add the texture to it. And then just let it roll back across your palate. And they talk about a wine being, maybe a wine has a long finish. There's no longer finish on the planet than there is with olive oil. And so it just evolves and evolves and evolves as you kind of taste it. So I'm gonna give this a taste.
Yeah, I couldn't wait. I just tasted it, and there's a sweet fruitiness to it, almost like eating an olive. It is so pure, and I get almost like a little like cough just at the back of my throat. Is that extraction bitterness that you're playing with there?
It's really kind of that burning sensation is really kind of those antioxidants or those polyphenols that are kind of basically kind of interacting with your own chemistry, so to speak. Everybody tastes olive oil differently. People pick up stronger flavor compounds in some oils than they do in others. This to me is a relatively, I got sunburn in the back, but it tastes relatively mild in some respects, but also to me, it has a lot of fruitiness to it and not a heck of a lot of bitterness. So, but it does have some nice fruit, which is always exciting.
But it does have that pungency. It's got that pungency at the end too.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely where you get a tiny bit of the bitter contribution, but a lot of the fruit. But it's really interesting. I've never had olive oil by itself.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing when you're tasting olive oils, because obviously, nobody's going to you're not going to do this. A glass of wine is a glass of wine. It stands on its own and is something to be admired and enjoyed. But olive oil is really meant to be complementary to your food. And especially with like extra virgin olive oils, the flavored oils that we're going to taste here in a minute are not extra virgin. They're considered just a flavored olive oil, which is adding flavor, whereas this extra virgin olive oil is enhancing flavors that are already in the food. So whether that's with tomatoes or cheese or meat or pasta or whatever those things are.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this is it actually reminds me of in a past life I imported a lot of Spanish and Portuguese wines into Australia, and when we would go there to do our buying, a lot of these estates had olive oil as well. And I distinctly remember sitting at Alvaro Palacios and Rhoda, and they would give you olive oil at the beginning and at the end of your tasting to really recalibrate your palate. And especially after you've been tasting Tempranillo and Ganache in Rioja all day, this is just so refreshing and really does give you back that calibration between bitterness and acidity, and it really cleans the palate. It's fantastic. We do have some questions coming through about the olive oil. Do we want to answer those now, or should we go through and taste the lemon and orange first?
I think let's taste.
Let's taste. Okay. Let's so I'm gonna pour first the lemon olive oil. And what I loved about these oils is that I love the estate olive oil for pouring on pasta, and I use olive oil very liberally. I put it in everything, in soups, pasta. I put it on my toast in the morning, especially at the moment where the end of summer tomatoes are really coming in thick and heavy. And I pour it all over my toast and tomato olive oil and bruschetta. And there's that sweetness that just goes with the fruit flavor. But what I loved about this lemon flavored olive oil was that I could pour it just as its own. I could travel with it and put it on my salads, and then also add it to some fish dishes as well. That we have the amazing salmon season that is going on at the moment as well, and Dungeness crab. And for me, this lemon olive oil was a hit with that when I just traveled to the coast with it. So can you? Oh, Yeah,
basically,
it's
the
sort of
process
different.
when it comes to making a flavored olive oil, there's two ways to go about it. You can do an infused, or you can do a fused. And infused is basically if I'd made an olive oil and then I bought some lemon extract, I could add that after the milling is done. But those tend to be a little bit perfumey and not quite as delicate. The fusing process is where we're actually co-milling olives with lemons or oranges or jalapenos or whatever it is we're trying to get.
Yeah, cool.
So that's always a kind of a big difference in terms of a really high quality flavored olive oil. Is like, is it fused or is it infused? And you always want to go with a fused.
Great tip. That's awesome. And that maybe explains why it feels like it's so much a part of the oil as opposed to, sitting on top of it or being like a flavoring that's added. It feels like it's really part of the oil.
It's really part, and it truly is, because it was truly co-milled. So we're adding about 1/3 or one part lemons for every 2 parts olives. So it's a lot of lemons.
Wow.
They're going into that. And obviously, I'm out there searching for lemons, it'll be citrus season here soon. And, I want the thickest skinned, lemon I can find. And it's really, and the aroma that's coming out of the mill when you're making these flavored oils. I made a jalapeno oil for the first time this year, and that was eye-watering. To make the citrus it smells fantastic.
Oh, I'm excited to taste that. Is that going to be commercial?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. That sounds like fun. I mean, I kind of almost am thinking of Riesling while I'm tasting this lemon olive oil, So now I'm going to taste the Riesling and see how they interact together.
Those are nice.
Mm-hmm.
It really complements each other. They go together quite well.
It's a good pairing.
Yeah. The acid in the Riesling and the sweetness in the Riesling just cleans up that little bit of spiciness and bitterness that sort of lingers at the back of the olive oil. And wow, they go really well together. So much fun. Let's taste the orange, because I'm wondering if the orange, sometimes in Pinot Noir, I get a lot of like orange peel or orange rind or bergamot flavors in Pinot Noir, especially aged Pinot Noir sometimes. And so I was kind of wondering if some of the orange character was going to draw out some of those flavors in the Pinot Noir, or if it was going to make the Pinot Noir more red fruited or more forest floor. I'm kind of interested to see what it does with the Pinot Noir.
They're interesting to smell side by side.
They're interesting to smell side by side?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, they really are, aren't they? And it's such a delicate orange influence in the olive oil as well, Paul. It's really, really lovely and subtle. It doesn't.
It's very subtle.
Is it the same proportions as the lemon? Like,
I actually I put in more orange, which is you think, because I had a hard time kind of getting where I wanted it to be this last year. I felt like the lemon oil, it was just making a lemon drop as soon as I was, it's just so rich. But I really had to play with the amount of oranges to get them in there. And it gets into, we slice them all before we put them in. And it's like, how fine do I slice them? That can affect the flavor too. So.
And they actually go together quite well as well. I feel like with the Riesling, it's almost like a no-brainer that it's going to go with the Riesling, but it actually goes quite well with the Pinot Noir. It does bring out a little bit more spice in the Pinot Noir for me.
It does. Yeah, I've always found it fascinating. We will do these matrix tastings of olive oil and the wines, and sometimes they really play well together, and sometimes not so much. But these do play well together. I think again, you're kind of getting that sense of what an olive oil texturally can do to enhance flavor, whether it be wine or any sort of food.
Yeah, absolutely. Really bringing out the spice characters or the fruit characters. it's fascinating it's really fascinating to try and taste these next to each other. I love it. And the orange is opening up quite a bit. You need that little bit of oxygen with it, and it starts to warm up a little bit, and the oxygen comes out, and then the orange is sort of starting to leap out of the glass a little more as well. Okay, now I'm tasting with the Riesling as well. Wow, yeah, that's really fun as well. It brings out more of the extract on the palate of the Riesling and takes it away from being so floral. It really does take it into that hard citrus realm, lime and lemon, and yeah, that's really delicious.
Well, I feel like the Pinot and the orange is just like fall.
Right?
It's
yeah.
Like your Thanksgiving meal. Like you could do a lot with that olive oil and a lot with the Pinot.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if you have like your Thanksgiving table and you have, the potatoes, and you can pour that orange olive oil into potatoes or over a cranberry and Brussels sprout salad or something. That would be fantastic. So if you haven't used all of these oils already, and save some for Thanksgiving, and we'd love to hear about what pairings you come up with or how you used them on some of your meals and in some of the pairings. I think that'd be fun to find out from everyone how they use them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some questions coming in about the olive oils, and then there's some other questions, but let's deal with the olive oil questions first. So I have one from Keith, which asks, hi Keith, once we open the oil, what is the shelf life?
So what I generally tell people is it's about 12 to 18 months, but it's so dependent upon how you store it. And personally, people talk about it like don't want to store it above your stove or your oven. I store it there because it's handy and it's convenient. So I don't really worry necessarily about the little bit of heat coming off your stove or when you're cooking. But what I do worry about is UV. So obviously the fact that we gave you this oil in a clear bottle is maybe not the best thing to do, but it looks really nice.
It does look gorgeous.
Ideally, you wouldn't store this on above your sink, where it's going to get a lot of light exposure, because it's really UV is much more impactful upon the quality of the olive oil than heat is necessarily. So, just kind of keep it in the cupboard.
Keep it in the cupboard.
Yep.
Great. And then another question from Jody. Jody's got great questions coming in. She had the question about the vintage as well, but Jody's asking, is the Durant EVOO pure olive oil? She's heard that some olive oils are cut or diluted.
That's very true. Some are, but in this case, I can assure you it's 100% extra virgin. And there's just real quickly, there's a couple criteria for extra virgin. First of all, it's got to be olives. You can't be cutting it with peanut oil or something else like that. The second is no chemical additives. So it's 100% mechanical extraction. So we're not using any sort of, solvents or anything like that. To get efficient extraction. So those are kind of a couple of the big things. And then we also look at the amount of free acid in the oil. So we have to be below a certain percentage. Acid forms when the fruit starts to ferment. So if you have fruit that's not, that is basically rotting, you'll form these acids in the oil, and that oil will go bad very quickly. So we look at the amount of acid, and it's really an indicator of what is the freshness of the olives when they went into the mill. So those are kind of the big criteria, especially the mechanical extraction. It's more difficult to do it that way, but that's the criteria for extra virgin. So, and a lot of oils, out on the market are labeled extra virgin, and they're probably not.
So we need some stricter labeling laws or certifications around that.
Yeah.
That would be great. Okay, so we've got a couple of others as well. I think we already answered, how do you flavor the olive oils? And then we had another question, what to pair with the orange oil. I was just actually thinking about the orange oil as well. The fall table, definitely, but I was also thinking about creme brulee. Pouring some of that orange oil on top of a nice creme brulee. I feel like that would be fantastic with the bitterness of the sugar, the burnt sugar. And
yeah. Well, and I think the olive oils go really well, especially the orange on ice cream.
Really?
Just like a nice vanilla with some orange oil and a little bit of salt, you kind of get that sweet, savory, and a really nice textural aspect to it. That's always been a kind of a favorite of mine. And then both the citrus oils, the lemon and the orange, especially the lemon, goes really well with any sort of grilled vegetable, and that sort of thing, and also on fish, especially the lemon.
Yeah. That's what I used the lemon on fish a couple of times, and I also did a little ceviche and used a little bit of oil in with the citrus as well. And I actually liked the texture of the sweetness of the prawns and scallops with the lemon oil.
Yeah,
it really brought out the richness in the scallops and in the prawns as well, in the shrimp and the sweetness. So yeah. I think there's so many uses for it that I hadn't really contemplated either until I had these, to use on my kitchen table. What other questions do we have? Janie, can you see any questions in there? There was one. How viewing the bottle would one know the bottling date?
Well, in the case of typically, we do, except because of this is such a limited bottling, we can assure you that it was a 2019. But more of our production bottling runs, you'll see it basically at the bottom. It would be etched on the glass, literally etched into the glass. It'll say the harvest date and the bottling date. And most reputable olive oil companies will do that. Even some of the big ones that are in the States, like California Olive Ranch, which is the biggest mill oil producer in the U.S., they put that right etched onto the bottle. So I always advise people to look there. It'll be right down at the bottom.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I see a question about the smoke. Fortunately for olives, and there's been some studies done by UC Davis, olives are tough, and that's a thick skin. And then the reality is, even if there is some smoke effects with it, or maybe there's a little bit of penetration, there's such a limited amount of skin time contact with the skins. Literally we're in the realm of minutes. So fortunately, in that world, olives have been pretty well insulated from the smoke effects.
Great. If selecting bread, this is from Kim Henry as well. If selecting bread to taste olive oils, which breads would go best with which oils?
Well, so when it comes to like breads, I like the heartier the oil, the better. So that would be kind of a hearty bread. So kind of like the rustic baguette, kind of a thick, kind of crunchy crust. That's how when we're tasting oils here, I think that the crust is as important as the actual heart of the bread. So you kind of want a little bit of that crunchiness to it. So kind of those rustic baguettes are really ideal, and ideally they're toasted out so that they're kind of that golden, darker brown color. And then also it's great with a little bit of salt. Everybody loves salt and olive oil. And cheese.
Yeah, and cheese. Love it. Okay, I guess we have, and Jody has given us a recommendation for the orange oil. She says that it's a nice addition to an olive oil chocolate cake.
It is. That's a great idea. That's great. Appreciate that.
That sounds fantastic. I don't know about you guys, but I am starving right now. Just gonna keep drinking the olive oil. It feels nourishing. Well, I think we have come to the end of questions, and we're definitely well over 90 minutes of chat here, and I'm sure we could do more. Unless there's any other questions coming through, or Janie, if you've seen anything, jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back to you and say thank you both for all of your information and your knowledge, and for being such amazing people and so committed to making fantastic products. It's so nice. It's so nice to live in this valley with people with such strong philosophies and great commitments to this land as you two are. So thank you. I've loved chatting with you today.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Bree. You're amazing. I love your questions. I love the depth. That made everything so much more interesting. It was awesome.
Oh, my
pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for just kind of taking the reins of Beyond Brooks, because you've got a whole bunch of others in front of you. And Paul, I mean, dear heart. Paul and I sit in an industry group together too, so we get to see each other pretty regularly, which is amazing. But I just always admired your business. I was so excited to learn about olive oil. Like, part of this for me was like, just like the tasting room, like I want to build a place I want to hang out. I wanted to do Beyond Brooks, the things I wanted to learn about. So I learned a ton today. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I would just, it is, again, I always go back to, it's a small valley and it's a small community that we get to work in, but then we get to project these products literally around the world, but we get to do it in such a collaborative way. So it was super thrilling for me to work with you on it, and Bree as well. It was great.
I love that we got to share with both of our followings each other, and that's super special.
Yeah.
So thank you both for being here, and we'll see you in the lounge, hopefully.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So next up for Beyond Brooks, we are working with Floreal Cider, and it is on November 14th at 1 o'clock, same time on a Saturday, same platform. And we'll be joined by Nate Reddy, who is the proprietor of Heuck Wine Farms, as well as Floreal Cider. And Nate is a really interesting character. He went from being a super clean-cut master sommelier, working for Maggie Harrison at Antiquatera, which is kind of a cult winery in Oregon, to this super bearded farmer in the Columbia Gorge. So he has a lot of great information, and just like Paul, is super passionate about what he is doing. So we hope that you will join us for that. And then I just want to thank Paul and Durant. You'll see at the top of your screen that there is both links to both of our websites. You did receive a coupon code for Beyond Brooks 10 in your package. That's good on either site for any products. So I hope you will support Durant with that. But just super grateful for all of you being here, supporting Brooks the way that you do. All of us are getting through this, crazy time. And I'm glad that we have each other, and I'm glad that we can steal away for moments like these, which is why I now want to invite you to the lounge. So hopefully the lounge is open, Katie, and everybody should see a button to head into the lounge. And there's one for grapes that Paul will be in. There's one for wine that I will be in. Bree will probably bop back and forth. And if we need to open more, we will. Because at least at this point, there's still 60 or 70 of us still on the call. So I hope you all come to the lounge. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next month.